Right. So up next, I would like to introduce our speaker who will introduce herself, Ms. Janea. Oh yeah, and then the mic. I told you to mention the mic. So during participation portion towards the end of this, with questions or anything like that, we'll have a microphone. If you have a question or a comment, statement, critique, raise your hand, and we'll bring you the microphone. Deal? Do I hold on to that?
Yes, please.
Hello, everybody. What a great presentation by Alexi to start us off with. So I just went hard to follow, but I'll do my best. So I'm just going to introduce myself first. My name is Janea Borrego. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a fellow Southern California native, West Side till I die. West Side till I die. So I'm also, just to know a little bit about me, I'm a Mexican-American, Latinx, queer, cisgender female provider. So I use she, her pronouns. So I just wanted to put that out there. And today we're going to be discussing, the challenge that LGBT folks struggle with during the holidays. I think we can all agree that the holidays is a very struggled time for people in general. And I think my goal here is to really kind of magnify the struggles that fellow folks from the community have to endure during this time. So a lot of my experience comes from, I've been practicing 10 years. I worked in many different levels of care. I've worked with different populations, kind of been all over the map. Programs I have used and abused me, and I've been excited to be there. But more recently, I pursued my passion of doing private practice work, where I can definitely focus on my inner desire to really serve people from the community, the Latinx community, the LGBTQ plus community, as well as the BIPOC community. I am a certified clinical trauma provider. I do a lot of modalities and works around that. So in today's kind of discussion, you're going to see a lot of the intersectionality between our topic, trauma, and culture, because that's the perspective that I come from. And I very much acknowledge that that's my perspective, and I'm open to hearing other people's perspective. And I think that's what I love, is just seeing all your guys' faces here. As I speak on perspective, I think one of the most important things in my viewpoint as a provider in this field is to be humble, to grow, and to learn. And for a fellow queer person myself, it's just such a privilege to see people come here, not just our own community, but our allies who are here. So it just means a lot that we're all in the fight to create change together. So I like to be a little interactive myself. So if I can get like a show of hands, how many are from the community, being the LGBTQ plus and our allies? So no. Thank you for being here, And then I just want to thank, the organization AAM. Say that 3 times fast, huh? And I'm just very excited and privileged to be here and to speak on this topic with you guys. I do particularly just want, before I get started, to know that my talk today is in honor of World AIDS Day and Club Q. I'm speaking to World AIDS Day specifically. It's a precious. We've lost a lot of lives to the virus, and our community continues to fight the negative stigma, even though the virus is able to be suppressed by medication. So I just really want to put that out there. It is still a lot of challenges around being able to obtain treatment. So I just want to dedicate my day to them, as well as the folks from Club Q. I'm a little nervous as I talk about that, because that hits me hard too. And I just want to acknowledge a lot of what we talk about today. It is very triggering. And one of the main things that being a trauma-informed person that's so important is know our limits, know our clients' limits. When we're affected, when trauma hits us, we're impacted, psychologically, physically, socially. So one of the biggest things I think is important is to know your limits, know your clients' limits, know that it's okay to take a break today. Know it's okay any day to take a break, or when your clients need that extra support as they process trauma and the struggles in which we do. As mentioned, we do our best to provide support at the end of this or during this if something's hitting a little heavy to your heart. So, and I just want to make note that my talk today is only going to scratch the surface when it comes to describing the complex layers of struggle our community faces during this time of year, just this time of year. So not speaking to every day, but just this one time of year. So, and hopefully it will remind and inform us that we can always attempt to learn more, and grow more. And we should always try to be kind and empathetic to the people we come into contact with, because we just don't really know what people are coming with. It's in my work, I don't look at things and go, hey, here's the symptom. But in treatment world, right, we're the medical model. Where they're like, you're the symptom, this is this, I need to fix this, I need to do that. So that's not where my perspective comes from. I also want to give a little disclaimer around that. But it kind of ignores the inner struggle in which that person is dealing with. And I find that the folks from the LGBTQI community have that inner struggle, right? The symptom is just an indicator to something larger internally in us that we battle with on a regular basis. A lot of what I talk comes from professional and personal experience. So, all righty. And so I'm just going to kind of start off with my first topic here, and it's a big one to me, I gotta admit. So, season change and time change, right? I felt it. Anybody else? Right? It's like, where did the day go? I don't even have enough hours in the day. So where's the rest of the day that I think I'm allowed to have, right? Vitamin D is a very helpful source to people getting outside, being in the community, being around people. When that goes away, you can see an exacerbation of symptoms. So you can see increased depression, increased isolated behavior. And I'm from California, right? Hey, who else is from California? Anybody else from like colder states? See, so when we get cold here, right, it's kind of like, oh, Californians, they get cold. And I'll say I love the winter. I get to wear my sweaters that kind of build dust in the closet. They have the hanger marks on them because they've been in there too long. So, but I rock them. Don't judge. So, the sun, it just gets darker sooner, and in what I say, like, again, I speak to like trauma. So a lot of times if just to kind of give a brief recap on trauma, when you go through, and I also want to make a note when I speak to trauma today, trauma is not the event. Trauma is how we respond to an event, what it means to us, how we take that in and how we see ourselves as a result of it, how we see others as a result of it, and how we see the world. So that's what I mean trauma, right? So understanding that maybe someone has had a trauma during the holidays, just feeling the season change can activate them. It can put them in fight or flight, depending on what happened, because we go into an instinctual place at that time. So if it's like cold or, there's an icicle dropping, a lot of that is things that, we don't always consider, but it is important to kind of have in the back of our mind. And obviously we all know, well, let me do this. What do you guys think of during the holidays? Lights. Family. Jewelry. Joy. I was like, whoa. Can I go to your Christmas? Can I go to your Christmas? Joy. Food. Too much. Travel. Okay. Music. What was that? Religion. Thank you. Burn a topic we're going to talk about. Any family? Warm. Ooh, where are you at? Staying cozy, huh, during the winter? Yeah, I get you. When I yeah, a fellow sister in the cause here. So yeah, I appreciate it. So yeah, I mean, it's very fair to automatically assume that like when we have the holidays, we're like, yes, we're excited, like we're super stoked, that this is coming up. I get to spend time with my family, my friends, enjoyed food, enjoy whatever specific holiday traditions that you celebrate that are specific to your culture and your tradition, because there's so many, right? But for a lot of people, the holidays alone are a trigger. The anticipation of the holidays is a trigger. Anticipating having to see family, having to see friends, having to go to places, like the obligations, the shoulds that we have that like culture pushes us to. right? Again, I'm Mexican American. We live by a lot of shoulds in our home, a lot, and we don't have the B word that Alexi brought up. We don't get to say the B word. Just throw that away with all the other curse words, okay? The B word just don't exist where I come from, right? So I'm going to kind of speak to like general things, like because we're here as mental health providers, right? Substance abuse providers, dual diagnosis, ED, all that good stuff. In my culture, I'm speaking from mine, there's not a lot of recognition around the mental health struggle. So when you show up and I need to take a 5-minute because I'm getting overwhelmed by being surrounded by 36 of my cousins, they're like, where are you? Where are you? We need you to clean the table. You know, we need you to serve grandma and grandpa. And I'm like, just give me a moment, you know? Or if there's, if some of your trauma exists in your family dynamic or wherever you're celebrating, it's just hard to be there. And some people they don't understand. We have families that don't educate themselves. They don't want to hear about it. They want you to pray it away. They want you to explore other means of taking care of it versus having a conversation. And I'm not saying some of those things aren't great resources, but I mean, talking is healing, right? So, you know, and what I'll say kind of from the substance abuse side, having to be around your family sober for the first time, right? Maybe you have to make amends to those family. I mean, I'm sure we've heard this, right? Family member shows up and all of a sudden it's like an intervention and we want to talk about our problems over Christmas presents. Like, not the time and place, but family members don't know that, right? Or they want to micromanage everything our client is doing. What are you doing in the bathroom? Why are you on the phone? Who are you talking to? Like, they ultimately can create more stress than be supportive, you know? So things that we're always thinking of in the back of our mind. And then having to be around unhealthy family members, you know, that's tough. You know, especially if you love them and you don't know the B word. You know, you don't know how to even describe what's happening or how to navigate it. A lot of our clients, you know, are just trying to stabilize, right? A lot of people go to higher level cares if they're in treatment, they're just stabilizing. They haven't even developed the interpersonal skills quite yet. They haven't fully developed the distress tolerance skills. They haven't reworked their cognitive structure to be able to go into this environment with a healthier perspective. That took me years to get a healthier perspective. Yeah?
What about people that are dealing with grief and loss?
Yeah, I'll definitely get to that pretty soon here for sure. So, and then I think in general, you know, we talk about parties, right? What are usually at parties? Alcohol. I mean, there was drugs at every party that I grew up. You might as well just put it next to the alcohol and the ice chest. But we never talked about it, but we knew it was there. You knew who you could go to if you really needed it, right? So here you are in an environment where you want to be around maybe your mom and your immediate family, but you're surrounded by all these unhealthy individuals. And how do you navigate that? What do we do? For some of our new clients who we think being connected to family is so important, you know, we have to be mindful of like what we're working with when we're sending them back into the family environments, you know. And then not to mention for us LGBTQ folks, the alcohol, tobacco, and I'm going to now say marijuana because it's a legal substance in California, they like to market to LGBT community as well as people of color. I'm guilty of it. I had a Stella Rose bottle in my house that had an LGBT flag on it, not realizing the ramifications of what that really means to the larger community, right? That's hard because we just want to be included, so we look at that as inclusive. Oh, yeah, let me support them because they're supporting me, but they're really only going to cause more challenges for people in recovery, right? And then in many places, a lot of our folks don't have places to celebrate. So going in a little bit of grief is not just the idea of losing someone. Grief is a loss. It can be a loss of a job. It can be a loss of a pet. Pets are very family members to me. So when we go and like when we don't have places to go because we're not welcomed, because they don't want to have conversations with us, because we're different, and then now someone has nowhere to go during the holidays. That's a huge amount of grief, and it's heavy, right? Healing is like connectivity. Connectivity heals so much. Love and connection is the power to so many things in our world. And families can just shut that off quickly. And then what does that say about us? We're the problem, right? This is the inner process I'm speaking to. We're the problem. We need to fix something. I'll never be right. I'll never fit in. I'll never be able to, like, I grew up in a big, I'll never be able to have my partner and my kids here. Those are real thoughts, right? Figuring, and it's easy to say, like, we now know for the more developed folks in the community, we have chosen families. When you're in the beginning of that, you don't even know what that is, and you don't even care about it at first. You have to give yourself a moment to really understand, right? So a lot of the holidays is really a struggle with not being our authentic self, not being able to present as we are, right? Not being able to just show up, you know, and having to, for some of our folks who like to be expressive, you know, with in their expression, it's a little bit more fluid, or it's different from their birth gender, right? A lot of times I've had people, you dress differently, right? You have to dress differently. I don't like what you're wearing. That's too butch. Why are you wearing that? Why do you have nail polish on? Why are you growing your hair long? Why do you have long hair on your legs? Like questions that, and it's not just the questions that we have to work through those ourselves, right? LGBT folks work through those ourselves, right? And then to have to answer them to everybody else. That's hard to explain who you are. It's kind of like, imagine a world, I like to have this imagination, right? For all our allies and, you know, our folks who are part of the heterosexual world, it's fine, no problem here, you're welcome. Imagine if the tables were turned and the way you lived was wrong, the way you looked was wrong. You had to explain yourself. You had to explain the people that you live with, who you sleep with. Your sexuality is put on the table for conversation. Why? I don't ask heterosexual people who they're sleeping with, like, or why? Or, are you straight? Are you straight? Is that your partner? Are you know? It's a question, right? We laugh because it's like, how funny that is. But am I gay? Do I have a girlfriend? That's what it feels like, right? It's funny because the impact is so heavy, right? And how we ask these. And then on top of that, not only are we dealing with the family dynamics, depending on where you're coming from, you're returning to a community that's homophobic, transphobic, acephobic, biphobic, all the phobics you have out there, and you're battling the larger communities, right? Having to deal with people staring at you, look at you, ask questions, whisper when you're just trying to buy a turkey at the store. That's hard to deal with because we have those whispers linger in our head. We figure out how to imagine like for the folks who spend Christmas with their family, they get to just put their kids in their, go with their spouses and put the presents in the car. We're driving home figuring out how we're going to have specific conversations, how we're going to navigate negative comments, discriminatory comments, how we're going to find joy in being in these environments. It's just hard. And then just, again, I speak to just like feeling the pressures of looking different for our fellow trans community. Imagine you're going through, gender dysphoria and you're struggling with really identifying who you are, and all you want to do is wear a dress and you're asked to wear jeans and a shirt. There's a high prevalence of suicidality with that community, and a lot of it is based on presentation and just alone. And of course, the other people, it's like, well, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Just wear a shirt, wear jeans, cut your nails. It's like telling, again, someone who's heterosexual, just date a guy. Right? Simple. It's simple. Right? So, that's very, in enduring the looks and the negative comments through that process. We're working through the internalized shame, and it's just like it's someone throwing gasoline on the fire, right? Just trying to just like feel good about yourself, and how you're presenting and how you're not being able to have, as trans folks work through their voices, change their voices. That's hard. It's super, super hard for our community. So. And let's not even talk about being misgendered. And families who just refuse to do it. They just refuse. So many of our clients, right? You'll talk to them, and it's so important that we're affirming, right? Like, hey, so-and-so, oh, you have they, them pronouns, great, they this, they that. You get that first phone call to the family, right? And all of a sudden they use she, her. And you're like, that's weird, we use they, them, right? Or we have a different name for you, and they're still using their birth name or their dead name. That's tough. That's so, so tough. And I kind of go again to kind of connection being such a vital part of healing, and how a lot of people lose that, right? In a lot of my younger journey, I was a little bit of a klep kid. That's where I found like, oh my God, boo, 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 boo. These are people, they look like me. Drink, drugs, yeah, we're having a good time. And then when I had to really make healthy changes for my life, I no longer had that avenue of my community. Where do I go now? That's where my people hang out. I see them at the corner. You see them? Let's go. And now I can't go. So even some of my chosen family, I can no longer be with them. I miss them. They understand me. They see me. We have our own traditions. And they're gone now. Who am I without them? Who am I in general if I'm now an individual who's part of the community that it might be a little too dangerous to go to certain parts during Pride or certain parties that all LGBTQ folks are a part of? Because, our community struggles, rightfully so, but they struggle. And I hate to say it, but misery loves company down there, right? A lot of times people heal in twos, or they relapse in twos, right? Or they decomp in twos, right? It's easier to do it with someone else than by ourselves, right? So how do you encourage someone to do it individually? It's hard. It's hard for me to rework how I viewed the community that I had developed such a habit with, and have a more adaptive way to thrive with my community, right? So having to, grief is a big part. We have to grieve our loved ones sometimes, right? Sometimes we're not invited to the holidays with your birth family, with all the people you love. And sometimes not everybody doesn't want you there, right? There's probably a good chunk of people, your cousins, your siblings, like they're more progressive, like, where are you at? Mom didn't have me here that year. Nowadays, everything's on media, so you go on Instagram and you're not part of the festivities no more. You're not in the photos posted. It's like you're gone. I got to be real. We grieve that, but so do the families. I have empathy all around. I really do. Like that grief hits everybody. Separation, like no one wins in that dynamic, but it's a real thing. So we have to grieve the traditions, our homes, every single family member we don't get to spend time with, the presents under the tree that are filled with jewelry. The food you can't tell, I'm a foodie myself, so my culture, my food, it's something to me. It brings people together. I'm a baby too, so I didn't really cook a lot, so I don't cook the tamales as good as my grandma does. So I got to go find them in the community, which I'm not mad at. You know, and we tend to lose a lot of people in general during this time of year, and in general, right, when we talk about grief, it just hits heavier during this time, right? I've lost loved ones, and, you know, holidays are about gathering, coming together, connection, and those people that have been vital in our life, or the loss of our chosen family, and we can't celebrate them. Like, the grief just hits heavier during this time, because it's all about connection and coming together and rejoicing with the people that you love. And to not be able to have that it's just so real. Almost in grieving your authentic self. You ever have to show up and not be your authentic self? There's a little grief that's going to go on there. If I got to wear clothes, say a different name, present differently, that's just challenging. I miss my authentic self. I miss looking at myself in the mirror and knowing that that's who I really am, and that it has to be different to appease other people. You know, a lot of people struggle with the desire to appease other people, and for us, it's almost like a necessity for safety, right? It's easy to, you know, tell someone, go be you, show up as you are, right? And just be proud, wave the flag. But recent events like that show us why we just don't feel comfortable to do that, especially when your home environment, that's such a staple to your development. It's just a huge contributor to how you develop safety in your life. And when you don't feel that there, how can you feel it anywhere? You know, I'm a huge fan of the love languages. My love language is safety. That's a hard language for a lot of people to receive and speak, especially our families, because they just don't feel safe in what's happening in the changes. They don't have education. Our families see events like Club Q, and they go, what is my kid getting into? What's happening? What's going to happen to them? We can't have that for them. They can't do that. It's just, I'm so scared for them, but they'll never be able to tell you that sometimes, right? They don't know how. They go into fight or flight. They go into survival, and they start saying, no, don't do that. And you just stop, please, right? Why are you wearing that? People hate that. I got to go outside like that, right? You're going to have the community see you like that? It's hard. And then I think someone mentioned one of the bigger topics here, right? Religion. I grew up Catholic. Shout out to Catholics. Not anymore. So I do have a higher power, though. I have a higher power. But I grew up Catholic. Ding, 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 ding. Get the bread, and sneak the wine, and you thought you were an adult when you were 12 because you snuck the wine at church. Right? Come on. I'd go around twice just to get extra blessings. I thought I was ready to take on the day after those blessings. Right? But religious trauma is so huge in general, but especially to our community. When people just open that book and say, you're not supposed to be doing this. And they weigh, you know, our experience as a heavier sin than every other one. Right? Because we live as ourselves every day. Right? Or if you've just been forced to go. Every Christmas Eve, we show up and we wait and we have the service, and then we go get to have presents, but we have to go to service before I can get a present. And then you ever sat in church? I don't know, for us folks, right? And they're, you know, and it can be brutal sometimes. We're thrown in the hellfire with all the sinners, right? It's tough. Because here's such a foundation in which the narrative in which you kind of grew up with, that this is a part of your life, but somehow you're always wrong in there. You're always a sinner. There's always something you have to pray for instead of everybody praying, right? something you need to get better at, something you need to change to get into the pearly gates. We're automatically told we're not allowed in there. That's hard to stomach, because then if you feel that up there, you start to feel it everywhere. It starts to build. Can't come here, you can't be here, you're not good in here, we don't like you here, and it's just heavy. So it's just hard to be in those spaces. And then again, I just highlight, like, boundaries are huge, you know, and our clients don't know them. They don't know how to establish them. You know, they don't know how, or they also don't know that, like, they don't have to show up for holidays if they don't want to. They don't know that. They've been told they have to be here. You need to be here for your family. The shoulds, right? The needs. You got to do this. You got to do that. You know, we're constantly just navigating our own way of fitting in and exploring who we are and what we're going through and how we're going to just exist. And all these kind of outside factors constantly telling us, you know, this and that or no, right? So obviously there are many, a lot of factors that kind of come into play, right? And so because of these kind of holiday-oriented stressors, you're going to see an increase of symptoms. You're going to see stress exacerbates alone symptoms, right? So you can start to see a huge increase in depression, a huge increase in anxiety. You know, for anybody who's got bipolar, you might see mania present. You could definitely, I count that a lot of suicidality increases during this time. And it's so important that we don't forget to assess for that. Because a lot of folks might not be willing to tell us, right? We want to be aware of cravings that are going to increase, we know for a fact. The parties, to knowing how to exist without these substances in their life. And then not to mention, I'm sure we've all heard this too, right? I've worked in recovery in my previous work experience, right? You remove drugs and alcohol. And what am I going to a party for without drugs and alcohol? You're like, to have a good time, I guess. Like, you know, we have to rework people's perspective on joy, right? And when you have people who struggle with mental health, who are on psychotropic medication, who have come off medication, who are on substances or are now coming off, there's a brain chemistry component that we have to consider, and the joy doesn't kick in right away, unfortunately. So they get discouraged, right? They're making these efforts to do better, and they're like, but I just don't feel better, right? Or they're now experiencing new symptoms, new struggles that they've never had before, and they're having to manage that in such a stressful environment, a stressful experience, right? We want to, make sure that it's so important to educate the folks that we work with of that process and to remind them, like, it might not feel good right away, but it comes. Your brain's a muscle. You got to rebuild it. It's taking a vacation, and now you're asking it to show up for work. It's in pandemic brain right now, and now you're asking it to go back to work. It's hard. It's challenging. Our brain needs time to heal and recover. And our client, right, especially with our instant gratification folks, they're like, I'm sober now. What do you mean? You told me all my problems would go away if I'd stop using. What do you mean I got to go talk to my mom now sober, right? What do you mean I got to talk to my girlfriend or be present with my kids who hate me? I'm not ready, right? It's a lot to navigate and manage emotionally. One thing that I just want to stress that's so important is understanding each individual's culture, right? So not just being part of the LGBT culture, it's one part of who I am. I'm a Latinx individual, and that's very huge to me, even though there's a lot that we got to work on that community, but I'm so proud to be part of it. So when you come into contact with your clients, it's so important to understand, like, yes, I get you're from the LGBT community, but what does that mean to you? As I mentioned, I'm Latinx, I'm Mexican American, I'm about third generation, so I don't maybe particularly know what it means to relate to someone who migrates from Mexico or is a first generation. It's very different. It's very, very different. everybody's experiences are unique to them. So it's fair to go like, oh, well, you're Hispanic or you're Asian American or you're African American. And we want to generalize that. You go, oh, well, I just read the other day, I went to a training that these are things I need to be mindful of, which is so great. It's so, so great that we're doing that. But we have to understand what that means to the person. What does it mean to them to be LGBTQI plus? IA plus, excuse me. I didn't like it for a long time. I wanted no part of it. I played around with it, you know. I was like, well, maybe I could do this or I could do that because I was managing what that meant and what it felt like to me and how I can accept myself and receive acceptance. So like I experienced internalized shame and I lived that for so long. I was like, yeah, I'm a member, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be that. I wouldn't dare come over here and have speaker meetings and progress our community. Because I'm like, I'm just a member. I'm quiet in the corner, right? Because that was what was safe for me. Or what it means to be Mexican American, what it means to be Asian American, African American. It's, again, we can easily assume and generalize all this, but we need to know what it means to that person and what it means to identify as that. What are the traditions that they have? How do they celebrate the holidays? Not everybody celebrates Christmas. We got Kwanzaa, you know, Hanukkah, King's Day. There's so many, I can't even list them all. Right? And not only like if you celebrate it, what does that celebration look like? And how can it impact how you feel about yourself showing up in that place? What does that community feel about you as being part of an being part of the LGBTQ community? It's so important for us not to just make those assumptions, right? And as mentioned earlier by Alexia, I'm very happy we having the boundaries with ourselves, right? It's easy to experience secondary trauma from our clients. It's so, so easy to do that and to experience that burnout for yourself, right? We got to be mindful of where we need to know our limits. And also what I'm going to kind of say to that is know when you're pushing your agenda on someone, right? So again, I speak for myself as someone who dealt with internalized shame. When someone pushed me in the direction of progress in the community, I was like, why don't you just F off? I'm not dealing with you. When they pushed and pushed and pushed, I was like, leave me alone, right? Sometimes it's not safe to do certain things. It's not safe it's easy as working in mental health to say, be around your family, be around your friends. It's not safe to do that sometimes. It's easy to say, well, if you come out and your authentic self, you're going to be so happy. You're going to do so great. It's not safe to do that sometimes. Our experiences are not the same as other people. They're not the exact same. We need to be mindful when we push our own agendas on clients and what that looks like, right? Another thing I want to speak to is like we have a lot of folks in the community and they're homeless, right? Or they couch surf. They don't have a lot of places to go. We need to be careful of the resources we're providing them. Know where you're sending them. A lot of trans folks, a lot of other people in the community, they get attacked at shelters and food lines. They're targets. You wonder why they don't just show up or they don't go and access their resources. We're like, why aren't they just doing it? Right? That's a question we always, maybe early in our careers, we ask, like, why don't people just do this? We say, oh, they're lazy. They're not invested in their recovery. They're not motivated. Those are symptoms. Take a moment to see what's going on in here. Know their story. Know what's happening, right? It's easy because a lot of places are driven by the medical model and we're like, we need to see change. We need to see progress, and this is what measurable progress is. But you have to understand that for someone just saying, I'm gay, that's progress. To say it out loud, that's progress. That's change. Getting out of the bed in the morning is progress to some folks, right? So we want to be mindful of how we are really helping folks. There are a lot of safe spaces. The centers do a lot of work. You know, the Trans Wellness Center, Trevor Project, they have holiday dinners around this time of year, gatherings for folks so they can have a safe place to be, right? So we just have to be very, very mindful that for folks who service like all genders, that we have to be careful that they're a specialized community and we can't give the same resources necessarily that we would give to someone who's heterosexual or cisgendered. We have to think about those things. And I think in many ways, just providing some of those skills for our clients, you know, making sure like we are guiding them to understanding boundaries, developing boundaries, communicating those boundaries, maybe offer to be present with them as they're navigating those. It's the scariest thing to do. I'm sure, you know, a lot of us have had to experience that as workers, right? Like having to support our clients as they do those things. And just skills, you know, let's educate our clients on what to expect during these times because they don't know it sometimes. They don't know what it's, you know, like to kind of walk into the fire of what's happening, trying to educate the families of what to expect during this time. If families are even involved, you know, even chosen families, you know, a lot of people can benefit from this education. So, yeah, and just in general, like our clients are huge communicators, huge communicators. Notice when they shift. Notice when they shift. It's so important to note, like, you wonder, like, how can I help my clients? Like, it's easy to go like, oh, there's Bob again. He's angry again. He's giving attitude. He's being a jerk. Can't stand, like, if he gets here, I'm going in my office. Clients come to us because they have struggles, and we have to provide empathy around that. There's something wrong with that client internally. Let's take a moment to understand that. Because again, it's not just like a general stressor of walking into a party and saying like, oh, well, I got to keep from drinking. It's like, no, I have to go in and just really, you know, impact the core of me and who I am and how I present. That's hard to anticipate, you know, so. Yeah, so I mean, I want to kind of create a little space for Q&A. So again, I just want to do like a brief reminder that these are just brief descriptions. You know, these are just, again, the surface of struggles that we can come into contact with during the holiday season. So, you know, we're going to constantly evolve. So, you know, it's a constant reminder for us to evolve and our work to evolve with the community, but just all people that we serve at large. And, you know, I just thank you very much for listening to me and a little bit about my blurb and, you know, allowing me to share.
Any questions at all for our presenter? Because let me know, I got the mic. It looks little, but it's mighty.
Oh, I just talked to it.
Yeah, it's for the video more.
Oh, okay. I thought I can't hear anything. First off, I want to thank you. I'm excited. I'm also, you know, Latinx, queer, you know, person, Mexican American, first generation immigrant here. So seeing other people in mental health in my community is very cool because, as you said, you know, it's very stigmatized still. You know, or they think you're weak-minded. That's like, you know, you have to be more strong-minded. So I want to first off thank you for today. My question, you know, is how you know, because I'm in school, I work in the field, but I'm also back at school so I can become a therapist, you know, in the future and serve my community. What's a proper way of when you're dealing with clients, asking them, you know, about their background, because you know they're going to be from Iran or what have you, right? So what's the proper way of asking them, like, hey, what is being LGBTQ, or what's that, you know, their culture?
I kind of get that question a lot of like how to introduce these topics because clearly they're sensitive, but I try to remove the sensitivity by the, like, I'm not sensitive, but again, it's like, it's who you are.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, I see differences. I see color, I see gender, I see non-gender, whatever. And it's important for me, especially as a provider, to know those things and how they impact you as a person. Those are all contributing factors to your personal development. So a lot of my services are for me, and I service all genders. So I'm very big on like, I'm going to ask these questions. It's in my bio. So when I have an initial intake session, I'm going to ask all those questions. So it's like, what is your culture? What does that mean to you? How do you identify? And can you be more specific on not just saying I'm Mexican American and Latinx, but what does it really mean on how that isn't, what are the traditions? How do they see us? Like you mentioned, being Latinx, you know, struggling is a sign of weakness. We live with that, and that's so hard. Like, not just being part of the LGBT community, but when I'm struggling with this inner thing, I'm now weak for struggling with my sexuality and my gender expression, right?
Yeah.
So to me, those aren't things like I necessarily shy away from. I let people know, like, these are things that are important to me to ask. Your culture is important to me because, like you said, if you come into contact with a, you know, someone who's Asian American, I'm not Asian American, so I really need to know what that means to them. Okay. So I just kind of head on say, like, what is your culture and what does it mean to you? And as they start to get open with it, I find that they have a little bit more comfortability around me asking more in-depth questions around it.
Okay. And one more question. How do you think we can do to like reach out more queer people within our community, and particularly queer Mexican American women?
Yeah.
Because I don't see a lot of them getting clean.
Yeah.
And I work in the field, and I think, you know, people who identify as women in general have a lower rate of getting clean, but like within, you know, our community, like, how do you think would be a good outreach or a good way of reaching out? Because they're struggling.
Yeah.
They just women have to be stronger, you know, so then they, you know, and queer women even more so.
It's education, you know, it's trying our best to have organizations like, you know, the one that we're here for today, and having people who look like us say, I'm just like you and I've gone through the process. I've struggled with complex trauma. I've struggled with going through that recovery process, all because I just wasn't accepted for who I was, and my culture told me it was weak. So I'm just like you. Like, it's very vulnerable to do these things, but it needs to happen so people can see, like, they're not crazy, like, they're not weak. Like, that's the narrative we live with, right? Like, I can't tell anybody about this. So the more that people, I mean, nowadays social media is huge, education, putting posts, like reaching out, like having providers that look like us, you know, because that's a huge thing too. Like, when I thought about being a therapist, I was like, man, you're full of crap. I'm not going to do that. Who talks about their feelings? And then here I am doing this, you know, but that's because the narrative that I was instilled for so long. So we're battling a narrative. But what I find that, again, for me, because I'm so strong-willed and our culture is like that, you can't come and say that's wrong. You could say, like, how hard it is to kind of find a new way, right? Oh. How hard it is to reconceptualize the way that you think, and it takes time. Yeah. I battle with my old narrative and my new narrative all the time, right? I have a different spiritual journey, but that old Catholic mind still kind of comes in and be like, you're a sinner. You know, just a little picket in my head just goes, you know. So it's also normalizing, like, the rate in which we change, right? Like, I do a really cool exercise I kind of developed. It's called a pro exercise. So I make my clients create a pro every time they do something to show them their change, right? Because we're so inclined to go back to negativity. So small moments are really big. Just admitting to myself that I was part of the community changed my life. Admitting it and being okay. Then it was being okay admitting it. Like, I knew this was it, but it was like, how do I change it? How do I date this person and present different, you know? So we have to share our stories. We have to educate. We have to normalize. We have to not combat the narrative so hard and take a more loving, connective approach versus like an abrasive approach.
Got it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Come on, Elizabeth, I know you got a question.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you
Yeah,
so
of
much for
course.
presenting. You shared so much about all the different layers and possibilities
Mhm.
people experiencing in the holidays. I wanted to see if you could highlight some tools and some like various things that, like maybe not interventions, but like ways of coping and resilience throughout some of those challenges during
Yeah.
the holidays.
Self-compassion work is a huge part of what I do, just because I think there is a huge struggle in which our community faces with like internalized shame. So we, as a means of safety, so safety is my love language. Safety is
that one.
huge. Thank you. We often can go into fight or flight, or we'll. I just had that happen last night with a client, right? You know, I had the client who just moved away to college and now is back in the home, and she's kind of exploring her gender expression as well as like her gender identity and her sexuality. And it wasn't even like super drastic, but she showed up without shaving her legs. And the mom's like, "Why are your legs hairy?" And she freaked out, and the next day came in and like wore a dress to appease her mom. So I think there's a part where, you know, you kind of have to work with self-acceptance and a little bit of like, it's not their job to navigate everybody else. So how do you protect yourself in that dynamic? So a lot of like, just because someone doesn't believe that like you're perfect, you are perfect. And that takes a lot to work with. So any tools around self-acceptance and self-compassion. And I have a really cool exercise that I do. So I do a suggestion box, right? And I say every time when someone says, "I don't like your coat," that's just a suggestion for your box. "I don't like that you're gay," that's just a suggestion for your box. "I don't like your partner," that's just a suggestion for your box. You can read it, you can absorb it and live that suggestion, or you can throw it out. It's your life, you dictate it. So learning to know how they can separate from themselves and differentiate from the people around them is like really important. But like, I just think there's a lot of work around self-acceptance and a lot of self-compassion around that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who else is that?
Boundaries too. Boundaries. Taking breaks and practicing that. So, you know, they're going to be in a lot of unique dynamics in the home. So kind of maybe sit with them, practice that. Like as they're navigating these things, they might want resources, papers to go home with, you know, journals, you know, things like that. Like take your resources with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll get that later.
Let's give another round of applause So I'd now like to take a second to collectively thank the AMP committee and all the attendees. Starting with the committee would be Nicole, Paulo, Tony, myself, Sasha, Mark, Nicole, Vincent, Gabby, DJ, Christina, Dr. Lockwood, and